Welcome back to Wheels in Motion. You worked late. You have to be home in an hour, and between now and then you have several errands to run, cell phone calls to make, and what seems like a million other things to sort through in your mind. Have you been there? I think we all have. Kimberly Dykman reminds us how easy it is to get caught up in our own worlds and to tune out others while we're behind the wheel.
It's easy to do, to get wrapped up in our own world, lost in our own thoughts and conversations, determined to do what we need to do and when we need to do it, remarkably oblivious to the world around us. Yes, even while we drive. As individual drivers, we trick ourselves into thinking that the traffic situation somehow revolves around me.
That everyone else surely must see the surrounding traffic scene just as I see it. Nothing could be further from the truth.
You may be paying attention to what's directly in your line of travel. Other people will be paying attention to what's directly in their line of travel, or perhaps they're distracted by something at the side of the road.
Ann Hillstrom is a visual perception expert.
Everybody thinks they're seeing the whole scene, but you are seeing one part of the scene. You have to expect that other drivers are seeing other parts of the scene.
For example, you might remain stopped at an intersection because someone in front of you at a crosswalk is slow to cross. The driver behind you doesn't see the person crossing, becomes impatient, and pulls around to pass you, a tragedy in the making. Or maybe you assume the driver next to you knows you are beside her. After all, you're in a big car and you've been traveling alongside for a good while, and you can see her perfectly fine. But what if she is focusing on something else and doesn't see you at all? And when she goes to change lanes, you have nowhere to go. The number of scenarios is endless, and they don't all result from a view that's obstructed by physical objects. Hillstrom says this is just the way our brains process information.
The fact that we will miss certain things when we're searching for other things is very common. We'll see what we expect to see, we'll look for certain things and avoid paying attention to other things in the scene. As drivers and as human beings, we grossly overestimate our ability to see what's going on around us. We always think we're seeing the whole scene as we're looking at it, but actually we pay attention only to small portions of it.
This phenomenon is especially apparent when the driver of a car or truck encounters someone on foot or on a motorcycle or bicycle.
A driver could be looking straight at a bicyclist, and if they're trying to look for automobiles and there's an automobile behind the bicyclist, they may not even notice the bicyclist.
So when we hear someone say, "He came out of nowhere," we know, of course, that whoever he is did come from somewhere. Indeed, a driver may have been looking directly at him, but the image simply didn't register in his brain. In fact, in 1/3 of all crashes involving cars and motorcycles, the car driver says he simply did not see the motorcycle. So, knowing this phenomenon exists, what do we do?
This is a very natural thing that happens all the time, whether we're aware of doing it or not. The best way we can compensate for it is to be aware of it, to deliberately compensate for it by broadening our focus of attention. We need to be aware that other people are not paying attention to what we're paying attention to, so we anticipate that they may not see us, they may not see oncoming danger the same way we are.
And if you're the cyclist or pedestrian, or even if you're driving another car, don't assume that other drivers see you. In fact, assume they do not see you, because odds are some of them don't.
It would be easy to assume that if they look directly at you, they actually see you. You might think that you're making eye contact with somebody when they're looking beyond you. And if they are looking beyond you or looking at a plane of space in front of you, they may not see you even though their eyes are directed towards you. So you must proceed with caution, even if it looks like somebody's looking at you.
So when it can be so tempting to believe that everybody else sees what I see, and I see what everybody else sees, and certainly everybody must see me, the reality is, it's just not so.
Let's take a closer look at how we should interact with others on the road. Bicycle riders, motorcycle riders, big trucks, even road workers. First, pedestrians. Jim Angelo has more.
Crossing this intersection is like playing chicken.
Patricia Fisk has to cross this busy intersection to visit her friends who live on the other side.
I'm trying to get across. I'm 76 years old and I don't move fast. And the light does not stay on very long and cars are turning in from both directions. So what are you gonna do? You just move as fast as you can and just hope you don't get hit.
Like Patricia Fisk, many of us, if not most of us, are pedestrians some of the time. Statistics show that 3 of every 4 adults in the United States walked, ran, or jogged for more than 10 minutes within the past 30 days. Unlike the location of Fisk's dilemma, most crashes involving pedestrians and most pedestrian fatalities happen at mid-block, not at an intersection.
And the reason for that is because the motorists aren't really expecting to see pedestrians crossing at mid-block. They're expecting to see them cross at an intersection with a crosswalk. Often, however, a pedestrian doesn't really have much of a choice. A crosswalk at an intersection may be too far away to walk to.
Foster points to this site as an example. This is a high pedestrian area. People routinely walk alongside this street on this sidewalk. This street ends at this T-bone intersection. People need to cross here, but the nearest crosswalk is about a block away, so they cross here instead.
It's just impractical to expect a pedestrian to walk 50 yards out of his or her way to go to the next crosswalk.
Foster says people sometimes have to walk on the street at mid-block because there are no sidewalks, or sidewalks are in disrepair. Someone could come out from behind a parked car, or jaywalk because there's no sidewalk. Children in neighborhoods may dart into a street at mid-block chasing balls or other toys.
The more a motorist knows about what a pedestrian is likely to do or the kind of circumstances a pedestrian faces, the better off that motorist will be when it comes to avoiding hitting a pedestrian.
Statistics reveal even more. Nearly 7 of every 10 pedestrian fatalities happen in urban areas. More than 6 of 10 happen at night. And 9 out of every 10 pedestrian fatalities occur during normal weather conditions.
Whether you're the pedestrian or the motorist, you can make car-pedestrian crashes less likely.
If you're the driver, be aware that people may be on foot anywhere on or near the road, and therefore, slow down. Know that it's likely that a pedestrian may cross a street at mid-block. If you stop at an intersection, stop before you reach the crosswalk. Do not pass another car from behind that is stopped at a crosswalk. A pedestrian hidden from your view may be crossing. Train your eye as well to look for people in wheelchairs or other electronic personal assistant mobility devices, and for people with canes. If you see someone with a cane, show extra caution. Any number of factors along roadways can be especially disorienting for persons with canes. Also, when you park, make sure you don't block any curb ramp or other device designed to help people with disabilities. Even though a car-pedestrian crash can happen anytime, anywhere, remember that most happen at night, mainly between 6 p.m. and midnight, and most happen in and around cities. Foster says, at some point, just about everyone is a pedestrian.
Either we're getting off the bus and walking to our destination, or we're parking our car and walking to see a football game or to pick up our groceries, whatever. So we need to be mindful of safe walking as well as safe driving.
If you are a pedestrian, take these precautions. First, plan your route. Take a little time before you start walking to find the safest route to get to where you need to go. Foster also suggests these tips. Go to a crosswalk if you can. Watch for drivers running red lights. Don't assume they will stop. Wear light-colored clothing. Walk with friends. Be alert to objects such as parked cars or trees that might hide you from an oncoming motorist. Walk against the flow of traffic. And do not walk alongside a road after drinking.
Just what they teach you in school, look both ways. Don't walk out from behind parked vehicles or around shrubs. Walk even more defensively because a pedestrian obviously is at much more risk than a motorist.
And be patient.
You know, just because that light turns green doesn't mean the pedestrian has the right of way. You know I'm an opposing figure, but I can't assume that car is going to see me. So I have to look first, because I've seen any number of near misses at that corner of people who just started out and the car is just coming right at them.
Safely across, Patricia Fisk has learned the benefit of precaution. This is Jim Angelo.
There are great benefits to walking, but practically speaking, do you really have a safe place to walk? How walkable is your community? That's a question 3 organizations have asked: the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center, the Partnership for a Walkable America, and the U.S. Department of Transportation have put together something they call a walkability checklist. We thought we would share a bit of it with you. You might grab a pen and some paper. Shortly we will give you information on how you can get a copy of the walkability checklist for yourself.
But first, joining us in our studio, a few folks who we asked to use this checklist in their own neighborhoods. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so were any of you already regular walkers, or is this just something new for you?
Oh, I love to walk. I walk all the time in my neighborhood. My neighborhood's so beautiful, has great trees and everything, but it doesn't have any sidewalks, so it's not as safe as I wish it was, but it's nice to walk there anyway. I do it all the time.
As you can see, the checklist is fairly short, but it has some really helpful questions. Alexa, I'm going to ask you to help walk us through this. What was the first thing you did?
Well, the first thing we did was me and my daughter decided where we wanted to go. We decided to go to the park, and then I had to figure out which was the safest path to take her on.
Okay, Marco, can you tell us what the next step is?
Well, I reviewed the checklist, and after I reviewed the checklist, I took it on my walk.
There are a total of 5 questions on the checklist, and the first one is, did you have room to walk? Did you?
Yeah, there's room to walk in my neighborhood. And the streets are pretty nice and fairly quiet, but then there's one street where it's really wide where I have to cross, so there's room to walk, but it's really kind of scary getting across it because it's so wide that you just practically have to run across.
Is there a light there to help you?
No, there's not a light. I wish there was a light. There is like a crosswalk, but it's not like in other states where cars will stop when there's a crosswalk and somebody's in it. It's not like that here. So the cars just keep going. You have to wait and be careful and
then run for your life.
for your life. Yeah, you do.
Okay, and then you gave a rating from 1 to 5 on the question whether you had enough room to walk, right?
Uh-huh, that's right.
And the ratings go from 1 being awful to 5 being excellent. Okay, the second question is, was it easy to cross streets? Was it?
Actually, it wasn't. Crossing the street, I found it very frustrating when the cross light was reflecting go, and then in midstream, it would turn. It just felt very dangerous and uncomfortable. I think that that was pretty much that everybody felt that way when we were crossing the street.
All right, now the third of 5 questions asks, did drivers behave well? What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely don't think so. I was taking my daughter to a park, and there was a crosswalk right in front of the park, and cars weren't stopping at all. So at one point, I actually had to pick her up to get her across the street. One driver did actually stop, but even with one driver stopping, the other ones were just speeding by. And I actually believe at that particular crosswalk, there was a blinking light indicating for them to slow down.
And people are still just going.
Just ignored it.
And you have a little baby with you.
Exactly.
And actually, when I was waiting for the crosswalk, people were just cutting the corners, almost taking my legs off. And there's footage of that, you know, so I had to back up literally, and I'm in the...
And it's right there, like off the sidewalk, or?
Exactly. I'm just, you know, standing on the sidewalk, and people are turning onto the sidewalk, basically.
Well, the next question asks if it was easy to follow the safety rules. Was it?
Crossing the big wide street, it was hard to follow the safety rules because the cars were coming pretty fast, and to dart out in front of them, it's hard to follow them.
All right, now, lastly, was your walk pleasant? What do you think? I mean, considering everything that's going on, I mean...
I don't think so. I was trying to have a nice walk with my daughter, and, you know, worrying about cars getting too close or not slowing down for us, and she likes to run and skip around, and it's something that I definitely didn't feel safe with.
Well, my walk was still pleasant. I mean, overall it was pleasant because it's a beautiful area. All the trees, they're so nice, and the houses are pretty interesting to look at, and, you know, sometimes I see people that I know and I can stop and chat, and so it's great because where I walk in my neighborhood, then I can walk crossing that big made streets, the hard part. But once I get across there, then I'm down at the lake, and I can walk on the trail around the lake. And so
that's beautiful.
it is pleasant, even though it's a little dangerous.
Okay, so you finished the questionnaire and you tallied up each question and you got a rating. How did the route in your neighborhood, in your community fare? Was it better or worse than you expected? I mean, were there any major surprises?
I've always thought my neighborhood was very safe and easy to walk until I took the checklist and noticed that the sidewalks do end and that I did have to walk in the street and that there are trash bins to push me out even further into the street. And then I actually started noticing all the big cracks and the breaking points in the sidewalks that my little girl could trip over. So I was really surprised on how my neighborhood measured up on that checklist.
You know, I guess I hadn't realized until I was walking with this checklist how many blind corners there really are there. I mean, the bushes are beautiful, the trees are gorgeous, but it's really obstructing the view both of the car and the person who's walking.
Well, you know, it sounds like there's a lot of problems. So have any of you done anything to address these problems?
The main thing I've been doing is working through the neighborhood association that's now trying to work with the city for getting some sidewalks in our area.
Okay.
I'm definitely taking different routes, which makes it longer to get to the park. And when nieces and nephews come over, I'm definitely now keeping a very close eye on them, even at the crosswalk in front of the park.
So, as some of you have mentioned, you might be able to pick another route, maybe a route that's safer for walking. Another thing you could do is contact your local works department and let them know about some of the problems that you've seen.
And in fact, the checklist comes with suggestions on how you might address various problems so that your neighborhood can become more walkable. Thank you so much, all of you. We really appreciate you participating and sharing.
Thank you.
It's been interesting.
And if you would like to get a copy of the walkability checklist, you may contact defensivedriving.com at www.defensivedriving.com and click on the Wheels in Motion icon. From pedestrians to bicyclists, Kimberly Dykman continues our coverage on sharing the road.
Mark Miller was riding with a group of cyclists through the hills around Austin, Texas. For several miles, all went well. Then Mark came upon a blind curve in a road he'd never traveled before.
And I came up over the crest of the hill not knowing exactly what was down on the other side. Due to bad road design and the fact that the bottom of the hill had a right-hand turn that was both blind for going both directions, I was literally whipped into oncoming traffic. I crossed the center line of traffic and I hit a 96 Toyota Corolla head-on. My right knee hit the headlight. I then hit with my right side of the body, the hood, the windshield, and went up over the top, tearing up my knee, breaking my hip, dislocating my right shoulder, and breaking my top 4 ribs.
Mark has recovered. He still enjoys cycling, but he's more cautious now.
What I learned from this crash is I didn't know the road. What I mean by that is I had never ridden or driven that road before. So when I came over the crest of the hill, I came down. At the bottom of the hill was a blind right-hand turn, for which, if I had known that was there, I would have ridden more defensively. I would have maintained a position far more to the right of the road, which would have allowed me to traverse the curve successfully without hitting the car.
Mark is one of some 40,000 cyclists injured every year in the U.S. On top of that, several hundreds die.
So, to say the least, I was very, very, very lucky.
With us now, Mark Miller and bicycle safety consultant Preston Tyree. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. I was pretty lucky to be alive.
I'd say.
For real. So what do you attribute your survival to?
Well, my helmet, number one, I had black and blue marks with the impressions of the pads in my head. So, and Preston here told me that if it was only about 15% of the people survived this.
Yeah, that's a extraordinarily dangerous kind of crash head on to a car.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough about how important it is for the cyclist to wear his helmet. There's no question it keeps your head and the pavement apart from one another. And I brought something else for you. I brought the front wheel, which hit the front of the car.
Are you kidding
and
me?
Shattered. Plus, I brought the frame, which has a bend here, 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 and here.
That's where the seat was?
Now this is where the fork was, seat was here.
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
So,
All you got was a couple of bruises on your forehead?
well, I also broke my hip, tore up my posterior cruciate ligament in my right knee, dislocated my shoulder, and broke the top 4 ribs.
But you lived.
Yes, I was back on a bike in 10 weeks.
10 weeks?
10 weeks.
And so what do you do with this? Do you,
Oh, this
do you
hangs
keep
in
it as a
this,
reminder?
this hangs in my office to remind me what I shouldn't do anymore.
Not ride a bike.
Oh, I ride a bike.
Yeah.
So it's
Not
just-
to wreck anymore. You don't run into cars anymore.
I promise I won't hit cars or dogs anymore.
Okay, good. Good. Well, let's talk about how bicyclists and motorists can better avoid crashes. Preston, I know you teach bicycle safety all across the country. What else can cyclists do?
Lisa, one of the most important things that a cyclist can do on the road is to be conspicuous. One, you dress brightly, but also you ride with traffic in the same direction as traffic. In fact, when you're on a bicycle, you're a vehicle and you have to obey all the same rules that a motor vehicle does.
What about at night?
Well, a cyclist has to be especially visible at night. You have to have a white light on the front of your bike, not a reflector, but a real light, and either a red reflector or a red light on the back. And not only is that the safest way to ride, but it's the law.
Okay, now we've been talking about cyclists, but do you have any advice for drivers?
Yeah, the biggest thing is to slow down. Most motorists don't understand how fast cyclists are going, and when they turn left or right in front of a cyclist, they usually misjudge the speed. So if you slow down and take it easy, it works a lot better. You really, when a cyclist does something stupid, it doesn't give you the right to run over them. Okay? It sounds funny, but that's really what it is. We all do things that we shouldn't do, but motorists have to be careful and not run them. You really don't want to be there. You don't want to run over somebody and go through all that pain. You don't want to spend the rest of your life knowing you've killed somebody.
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy. Yeah, totally.
Is there any other tip you'd like to share with us at this time?
Yeah, you know, motorists should get rid of all obstructions in the car. If you hold up your finger, you can cover a motorcyclist or a bicyclist at 100 yards. Just think what happens if you've got Mardi Gras beads or fuzzy dice hanging from your rearview mirror. You need to get rid of all obstructions and blind spots that you can.
Wow, that's really useful information. Thank you both for being here, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
No problem.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Riding a motorcycle calls for special caution. Listen to these startling statistics. Recent data shows that per vehicle mile traveled, motorcyclists were about 21 times as likely to die in a motor vehicle crash as persons in passenger cars. They were 4 times as likely to be injured. Joining us now is motorcycle instructor John Elliott. Mr. Elliott, why are motorcyclists so vulnerable?
Well, there's many reasons why motorcycles are so vulnerable. Some of those reasons being, unlike a car, we have airbags and doors and side beams to protect you. Motorcyclists only have their professional gear, such as a helmet, a good quality motorcycle jacket, some full finger motorcycle gloves, hopefully a good pair of riding pants, and some over the ankle boots or shoes. Also, of course, motorcycles are not as easily seen as cars or trucks, and a lot of your drivers don't actually look for motorcycles or motorcyclists.
We have a video clip to demonstrate this. Let's watch. John, can you walk us through this?
Okay. Here you see a driver in the car waiting to pull out at this intersection. Do you see the motorcycle approaching? Okay, now look at the other side of the screen. Now the driver sees a big 18-wheeler approaching. Which looks closer, the big rig or the motorcycle? Which looks like it's going faster? Which would you pull out in front of to cross the highway? Well, the truth is the big truck and the motorcycle are at the same place and going the same speed. But because the motorcycle is smaller, we perceive it as being further away and going slower. We would say stopped for the big rig, but we might be tempted to pull in front of the motorcycle, likely causing a crash. Again, in a crash, a motorcycle is vulnerable because he has no protection except for his helmet and his protective gear.
We have some more video clips to show some of the more common situations involving motorcycle crashes. Mr. Elliott, would you kindly describe what's going on in this video clip?
Sure. What we're seeing here is a setup for the most common crash between a car and a motorcycle. The driver of the car turns left at an intersection, right in front of the motorcyclist who is going straight. That's the crash that's most common. So here we see the motorcyclist riding alongside a lane of cars. He is directly in the blind spot of the driver next to him. So when the car driver changes lanes, you get a crash. Recent statistics show that if there's a crash involving two vehicles, with a motorcycle being one of them, and there's a fatality involved, in more than 25% of the cases, both vehicles are going the same direction. So here's another dangerous situation. This road is in poor condition. It's bumpy and has a lot of potholes. A motorcyclist may swerve in front of another car to miss a pothole or a bump, and this could cause a crash.
Okay, I think you've got about 3 more brief clips, right?
Okay, here the weather is making the road dangerous. A motorcyclist can't brake or handle his motorcycle as well when the road is wet or icy. The weather is also a factor in this clip. See how windy it is? A strong gust of wind can actually move a rider across an entire lane if he isn't ready for it. Even wind gusts from a big truck can be a hazard. So big rigs, or even buses, or vans present another problem around motorcycles. They can block the motorcycle from other drivers' views, which means the motorcyclist can't see around them.
You mentioned helmets earlier. According to a recent federal survey, helmet use among motorcyclists dropped considerably. What do you make of this?
That's definitely very alarming. All I can do is really emphasize how important it is to wear a helmet when you're riding your motorcycle. Helmets save hundreds of lives every year, and there's a recent study that shows that helmets can also be very helpful in preventing brain injuries.
John Elliott, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Look familiar?
Looks familiar to me. It seems like more and more when I'm on the freeway, I'm surrounded by trucks, big trucks, and I'm never really sure what to do. Ryan Wickerham has some suggestions.
We share the road with a mixed bag of users. Drivers in all sorts of passenger cars and pickup trucks, people on motorcycles and bicycles, even people on foot. But when it comes to size, none compares to this.
Those big rigs just scare me to death. They're so big, I get nervous around them.
I hate the way they seem to just hover over you. When one's behind me and I look in my rearview mirror, that's all I can see, just that great big truck right in back of me.
Recent statistics show that 1 out of every 8 traffic fatalities resulted from a crash involving a large truck. There are ways to avoid crashes with these big rigs. To better understand, let's see the road from their driver's seat. Lewis drives this rig all over the country.
From a normal driver standpoint, they have a greater field of vision than we do. Even though we're elevated in these trucks, we have multiple blind spots. And there is a lot of spots around these trucks that we cannot see.
If you travel in the trucker's blind spot, you could put yourself and the trucker in danger. A general rule is, if you can't see the truck driver in his or her side mirror, then he or she can't see you. Even if you are not in the trucker's blind spot, don't linger alongside. Move on ahead. Otherwise, you make it difficult, if not impossible, for the truck driver to get out of the way if an obstacle appears on the road ahead.
These trucks are so big and so heavy, our stopping distance is far greater than your normal car. People in a standard passenger vehicle have a tendency to pull out in front or in between us and other cars, cutting down our braking distance, and it puts them in an awfully dangerous situation.
And it's similar news at the back end of these trucks. If you are driving behind a big truck and you cannot see the truck's rear view mirrors, then the truck driver has no way of seeing you. That's dangerous. If the truck driver stops unexpectedly, where will you go?
These trucks, just by nature, are awfully big, they're awfully fast, and people really need to realize just how big and how fast these trucks are.
People who work to repair our roads and highways find themselves in highly dangerous situations.
Watch out for them. Highway work areas are usually marked by orange signs, flags, and equipment. If you come to a road construction area, slow down. If you see that some lanes are closed ahead, change lanes early. Don't wait and get to the end of the lane you're in and then try to merge. Be prepared to stop.
While being careful in work zones, don't get distracted by the work. That could lead to other problems.
And regardless of your traffic environment, it's these same two questions that are so important. How well can I see, and how well can I stop?
And a way to keep both speed and stopping distance under control is to keep a cushion of space around your car at all times. Remember the rule? Yes, we've reviewed this earlier, but this is worth repeating. If all conditions are perfect, keep 3 seconds between you and the cars around you. Look at the car ahead, pick a certain landmark like that sign that's highlighted. Then as the car passes, you count 1001, 1002, 1003. If you pass the landmark before you finish counting, then you're traveling too close and need to back off a little. Add 1 additional second for any condition that is less than perfect, such as there being heavy traffic, you're not feeling well, the sun in your eyes, or other distractions. Add 2 additional seconds to your space cushion if it is raining or snowing. Katinia McHenry has more on keeping a safe amount of space around your car.
The cushion of space is not just for the front of your car, but for all the way around. This rule works up front, but what about the car behind? There are 3 tips on how to keep space between you and the tailgater. The first thing to do is to drop back to allow extra space between you and the car ahead of you. That way you can slow down gradually if you need to and avoid a quick stop and being hit from behind. Second, warn the tailgater beforehand if you do plan to stop. If you plan to stop, tap your brakes lightly a few times before you stop. And third, try to get away from the tailgater. Try changing lanes. If you can't, then increase the distance between you and the car in front of you to encourage the tailgater to go around you. And if that doesn't work, then pull off the road when it is safe and let the tailgater pass. Now let's look to the side of your car. Yes, you can control space on the sides of your car too. 7 tips. 1. You've heard this one before. Don't drive in the blind spot of another driver. The problem is simple. He can't see you. 2. Avoid lingering alongside cars in adjacent lanes. Traveling side by side limits your and the other driver's ability to react. Either move ahead or drop back. 3. Keep as much space as possible between yourself and oncoming traffic. On multi-lane streets, stay out of the lane next to the center line if you can. That way you'll have more room to avoid an oncoming car that might swerve toward you. 4. If possible, make room for cars entering the highway, even if you have the right-of-way. 5. Don't drive alongside other cars near highway exits. Drivers often make last-minute decisions at exit ramps. You don't want to be in their way. 6. Keep a safe space between your car and parked cars. This is dangerous territory. Someone hidden from view can suddenly step out from behind a car, or someone may open a car door right in front of you. And tip number 7 for keeping safe space to your side, always leave plenty of room between your car and anyone riding a bicycle. As mentioned earlier, you should allow extra space between yourself and the car ahead if you are being tailgated. In that case, you should work with the 4-second rule instead of 3. There are other instances when you should give yourself a bigger cushion of space. Here's a rundown. Allow more space between you and the car ahead if you are on slippery roads. If you are following a motorcycle, if you are pulling a trailer or carrying a heavy load. In all these situations, you need more distance to stop. Also, allow more space between you and the car ahead if the driver behind you seems to want to pass. She will need space to move into. You need more space if you are following a large truck so that you can see around the truck. Finally, allow more space when you follow a bus, school bus, or a truck carrying flammable materials. All these vehicles must stop at railroad crossings, and the extra space will help make sure you have plenty of room to stop when they do. A safe cushion of space, we need it in front, in back, and at our sides. I'm Katina McHenry.
Maintaining that cushion of space depends in part on speed, how fast you are going, and how fast others around you are going. But how fast is fast enough? How slow is slow enough? The factors that should help us decide how fast to drive may seem pretty obvious, but a little reminder never hurts.
Whoa, they may seem obvious, but for these factors to have any meaning, we have to be alert to them, all the time. Police Sergeant Randy Glasgow joining us now for a quick rundown. And now, first of all, stay in tune to the number and speed of cars around you. Why is this important?
It's important to go with the flow of traffic, so you don't cause problems with drivers around you by either going too slow or going too fast.
The next factor that helps determine how fast you should go? What the road surface is like.
A roadway that's either wet, icy, or covered in gravel, for instance, is much harder to stop on than, say, a smooth, dry pavement. So if you find yourself on a slippery road, you need to slow down.
Other factors? How close you are to people riding bicycles or to pedestrians. If you are near them, slow down.
Finally, slow down at curves.
Yes, the faster the speed, the less control you have of your vehicle. That is, whether you're on a straightaway or on a curve. On a curve, you have centrifugal force working against you. That force can pull you to the outside of the curve. It can pull you onto oncoming traffic or off the roadway. And remember, slow down before you enter the curve.
Sergeant Glasgow, thanks for joining us with those reminders on how to decide how fast to go. We appreciate it.
Watching our speed, keeping adequate space around our car, these are things we can do in the car, on the spot. But there are steps we can take even before we open the car door to help make a safer trip.
You mean plan?
Yeah. You might think, who in the real world ever has time to plan a trip across town? Or at least that's what I first thought. But actually, being prepared doesn't take that much time. And once you're in the habit, it doesn't seem like a big deal at all.
That's right. Listen, we're simply suggesting that you think about your trip. Is traffic likely to be light or heavy? Is it raining? Is road work still taking place on a certain street downtown? And then plan your route and time you leave accordingly.
If you plan to go to an area unfamiliar to you, grab a map, plan a route, and memorize the street or highway names where you need to turn.
And we can't emphasize this enough. See that you're rested before you drive. And as an ongoing practice, keep your car in good operating condition. That includes keeping a spare tire in good condition.
Also, check to make sure your license plate frame does not obscure any portion of the state name or license plate number. Having this license plate information obscured is illegal, and you could be pulled over for breaking the law. Just think your drive through before you get behind the wheel. It's like anything else. Once you're in the habit, it becomes second nature. You'll be glad you did.
Hello, I'm State Senator Royce West. Today I'd like to discuss with you the Community Safety Education Act, legislation designed to define the behavioral expectation of law enforcement and citizens during traffic interactions. More specifically, there's been issues that have arose over the last few years concerning the interaction between law enforcement and citizens. And in many instances, there have been fatalities as a result of this interaction. And so we believed in Texas that to come up with behavioral expectations for those types of interactions would be most appropriate. Towards that particular end, we've assembled a group of stakeholders, law enforcement, civil rights organizations, to come up with what we believe should be a set of behavioral expectations during those interactions. And so those behavioral expectations have been set forth in our driver's license manual. So when a person studies for their driver's license test, they will have to cover that content. And yes, you should expect at least one, maybe two questions on the driver's license test to cover that particular content. In addition, we decided to make certain that we embed it in the DNA of the state. The way we have gone about doing that, we've placed it in our school system and requiring, yes, mandating that students between the grades of 9 through 12 get that content, that is the behavior expectation, know what their rights are, and know if they want to compliment or either complain about a police officer, exactly how you go about doing that. In addition, we have placed that in our driver education courses as well as our police academies. The reason for doing this is to make certain that to the best extent possible, everyone is on the same page in terms of what are the behavioral expectations when stopped by a police officer. Heretofore, police officers understood what the behavior expectations were, but citizens haven't understood it. And so by making this simple change, we believe that we've incorporated into the DNA of our state, and by doing that we can make these types of interactions safer for all concerned. This is State Senator Royce West. Thank you.
Okay, please go faster because I am running late. I will not make
I'm
it go
going
faster.
as fast as I can.
Please, just go through the light. Just don't let that light turn red.
Okay, fine. I think we're getting pulled over.
What? Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh no.
Obviously, if I go over the speed limit, we're gonna get pulled over.
Passenger, put your hands on the dash. Passenger,
Ma'am,
passenger, put your hands on the dashboard.
Thank you.
They said I
Driver, put your hands on the steering wheel. My name is Deputy Larry Hatch, Travis County Precinct 1. The reason why I stopped you is speeding 45 and 35. You have your driver's license and proof of insurance, ma'am? Thank you. Sit tight for a second, I'll be right back with you. You'll be asked to sign a citation.
This isn't saying that you agree. It's just saying that you're going to follow up with the court.
Now you're going to be issued a citation for speeding 45 and 35. It's not a admission of guilt, but a promise to occur to court. You sign right here at the last line, the bottom line right there.
You will get a copy with all the information you need.
You'll receive a notice in the mail. You got 30 days to appeal. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Penn. The video you just watched is intended to show you what not to do when you're stopped by a police officer. But what is the right thing to do? How should you as a citizen handle the situation? We've asked a cross-section of high school students and ordinary citizens to help us out by asking some of the typical questions that you might have about the right way to handle yourself if and when you get pulled over. Let's get right to it.
What does the officer expect to see when he approaches our car?
Officers don't always have a clear view into your vehicle. Keep your hands visible, don't move around, don't reach for anything. For example, you can place your hand on the steering wheel in the 10 and the 2 position. That makes sense? Take a deep breath, breathe, relax, wait for the officer to approach, and he'll give you further instructions. If it's dark,